In this episode of the Smart City podcast, we have part 2 of my conversation with Bronwyn Voyce. Now, part 1 we covered in the last episode. So we talk about the Future Leaders, Future Cities delegation, Bron's background, as well as we talk a little bit about the sharing economy, a little bit of karaoke in there as well. Now, this episode, we continue our conversation. We started by talking about Hong Kong and the observations that Bron had, and also we dive a little bit deeper into Japan and our observations. Then we also talk about disaster resilience, which both countries are facing in different aspects. And also we talk about future of mobility and emerging trends and how there's lots of challenges that are coming to light with facial recognition technology. So as always, I hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as I enjoyed making it.
It's the Smart City Podcast, whoa, with Smart City experts, here we go. Connecting smart technology, both big and small. Smart cities are making life better for all. Big data, emerging trends, self-driving cars and more. The Smart City Podcast is what you're looking for.
Hong Kong's got some really great stuff happening with their Smart City Consortium. They have their construction industry, their construction council have, really, I think, are market leading in terms of the technology that they're adopting to have, smart buildings, smarter planning, smarter developments, smart living, responding to climate change and the environment. So yeah, I saw a lot of that, and went, we had a few meetings and I had a few sort of site visits around the place. So, and they've got a phenomenal amount of money that they're investing in smart cities. Particularly when you compare it to the Australian context, it's, ours is really just a drop in the ocean. Notwithstanding that we're absolutely different scales in terms of economies and population. But they are investing a lot of, I think that, given there's that really fundamental, traditional, very kind of, old world industry that happens in Hong Kong, it'll be interesting to see how they manage to transform, the whole sort of city or island into a smart global hub. But I think they've got the talent, which is really critical. And I think that's where Tokyo, or Japan more broadly speaking, has some really significant challenges. And, we discussed a lot of that. We had some great speakers at our delegation in Tokyo, and
Future Leaders, Future Cities delegation. Yep.
Yeah. Talking about the big challenges that they have with a really significant aging population, the amount that the government's investing in social welfare and as one of our speakers put it, investing in the past, as opposed to, investing more in the future generations. So I think that talent attraction, talent retention, and keeping, young people interested and engaged in Japan's economy and society is a great challenge for the government.
Yeah, definitely.
And business, I should say, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, business. What I kind of took away was that there's a lot of tech focus, but the challenges they face are people challenges. And I think that there's lots that we can collaborate with Australia on that we've kind of totally different scales and different kind of, challenges, but similar, kind of issues or things that they're going to face. The aging population, for example. I mean, obviously they're also dealing with decreasing population, and how they're going to deal with that. But also that emergency and recovery kind of aspect. Like, I think it was really interesting. I mean, it's by necessity, but that the kind of heart of Tokyo can still stay alive while an earthquake, major earthquake or whatever is happening. Whereas in Australia, I think we've done what we needed to at the time, but with the flooding, for example, in Brisbane, the coverage and network was down, and we just expected that to be the case. That was okay. But I think we could learn from Japan, not obviously in the same context of earthquakes, but other disaster and resilience, I suppose, is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, look, I mean, coming from North Queensland, we've had our fair share of natural disasters, and
yeah, definitely.
I think obviously scale's different when you're dealing with a few million people in the middle of a city versus a very geographically dispersed population, but that in itself brings its own challenges. And yeah, I think that there are some similarities and some things that that we could share in terms of our disaster recovery. But I think also Australia is actually quite a leader in that space. I've been to one of the disaster centres up in Darwin last year, in fact, and we go and help other countries, particularly emerging and developing nations and nation states when they have their disasters, and we have leading world leading experts in disaster preparedness and recovery, and I think our communities are becoming more resilient, and we have to if we're going to continue to experience tropical cyclones and flooding and bushfires. We're not going to ever stop Mother Nature, so we do have to think about that. But again, that comes back to the conversation about smart, building things back better, using technology to better design roads or drainage systems, or whatever the kind of the infrastructure is that it's all impacted. We can start to think about that in a different light when we think about the smarts of a smart city in disaster preparedness and resilience.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I'm glad to get your perspective on the disaster relief, because I know in the regions, obviously in North Queensland as well, with tropical cyclones, it's incredible what we can do when we band together. And then to add that smart city layer, how are we going to build it better next time? Or how are we going to build it more resilient next time? How are we going to use the sensors, before, during and after a disaster or an emergency?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, awesome.
And I think just quickly, I just wanted to touch on just around Japan and some of the challenges around their population that we talked on. I've just done some work with a Central West council in Queensland, and they have some of those same challenges. They've got an aging population. They've got less young families living in the region. Those are the sorts of issues that they were talking about facing some of the regional areas in Japan. And, thinking, Australia is an iconic tourism destination, as is Japan, for many reasons. And, they've transformed some of their cities by, leveraging the Australian market, in fact, for, snow skiing holidays, etc. So I think there's a lot of, opportunity from an economic development and a regional development for Japan and Australia to connect.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, that's awesome. So, we just touched on that. What are some of the other projects and things that you're currently working on?
So I've been doing a variety of work since joining this consultancy firm, which has been really exciting. The most part, I still get to do what I love doing, which is work with councillors and local governments around Australia, thinking about their own economic development, smart council / digital transformation council, and smart city strategies, but also working with the private sector and thinking about things like the future of mobility and what that means from a technological, telecommunication, and a government policy perspective. So those are a couple. I've been working with a university on a living lab concept to develop a brand new university campus, one of the biggest campus developments in Australia for, I think, almost a couple of decades, and thinking about really how they integrate a living lab in terms of understanding how communities operate and the challenges and what a university, a foundational university, can do for a regional area. So those are just a couple.
Yeah, cool. So I know you've worked in the majority of the different, the levels. So you've worked in the government. Now you're in a consultancy. want to hear your thoughts about how we can better integrate across the different disciplines in governments, industries, academia.
The $1 million question. Look, I don't think there's a perfect solution. I think there's a role for leaders and influencers to do just that, to step up and lead and bring together people around, dinner tables or coffee tables and boardroom tables, whatever it may be, and have really important discussions. And then also do the same with the community. So I was at an event in West End / South Brisbane on the weekend, and on stage was a local government councillor, a academic, and an ex long-term public servant who is now doing some great work in blockchain. And, for those three people to be sitting in a panel discussion centered around blockchain, but, talking to the community about some of the opportunities, some of the issues, the challenges from their various kind of somewhat siloed kind of organizations / institutions, but kind of breaking down those barriers and having really good and robust conversations and getting people to think, getting people to engage and thinking of new ways to bring people along on the journey. I think, those are just kind of the sort of the fundamental things that we need to be doing more. And then the other thing is think about how we do improve our civic engagement from a government perspective, but as well as, as businesses, we need to be, I think, more responsible in terms of our contribution, our impact, and our, to society and to, the local economy and just more, broadly the people's lives who we impact by the work that we do and who we employ. So, I don't think I've got like a particularly perfect silver bullet answer. It's just all about, I think, responsibility, collaboration, and using, dialogue and data to really understand the real issues and make better decisions.
Yeah, no, I think that's perfect. I like the analogy, the real life circumstance, I suppose, of having the people on a panel and all speaking at the same kind of the same kind of level to the community. I think that really, symbolizes the future of how this kind of smart city integration piece will work. So that's a great example.
And let's get together on, the big issues that we know are emerging, like, we talked about, or the big opportunities, the potential. How do we want to start, thinking about autonomous vehicles from a developer's perspective, from, a planner's perspective, from the telco's perspective, from a vehicle manufacturer's perspective, from a roads and regulation and road infrastructure perspective. Are all those people sitting around the table now? And if they are, how are they sharing that information more broadly with the public and with the impacted stakeholders about and driving that dialogue and driving, that discourse in our communities. So, yeah, I think that there's a lot of place for that, or more space for that to happen. And I think with, using, the mechanisms that we're all engaging with, whether it's LinkedIn, Facebook, Snapchat, whatever the sort of the going, the going social platform is, using that to engage better with our communities and citizens more broadly about some of the opportunities and the things that we sort of start to think about, rather than just seeing something that's, happening over in, Paris or Hong Kong or Tokyo. And there's some great examples. Don't get me wrong. I think, one of the ones that comes to mind is in the Outback region that I've been working with. They're thinking about themselves as a global tourism, destination. And I think that's fantastic when, we live in an age where it's more about the experience and people want genuine and authentic experience. But on the other hand, they're looking at renewable energy, and they're chasing some pretty, big investment in that space. And they're also positioning themselves for drones and because they've got all this wide open space. And so to do drone testing and pilots and, getting all the kind of the regulations and all that. And I just think that's a really great example of, how we can think outside of the boundaries of our metropolitan areas and this great, nation that we have, and bring everybody on the journey.
Yeah, definitely. So, second last question, which is, what are the emerging trends that you think aren't being talked about enough?
I think, one that really comes to mind, particularly, I guess, in the technology space, and given our recent visit to Tokyo and seeing what NEC and Fujitsu and, some of the biggest tech manufacturing and most innovative companies in the world, where they're leading with their facial recognition and their gaze. What was that called, Zoe? Their gaze.
Yeah, where people are looking, kind of.
Yeah, so they I just for your listeners that they had this demonstration that they showed us, but there was a group of 20 of us standing in the room, and they could basically sense through this technology where each of us was looking at the screen, and then based on kind of where the majority was looking, a certain type of advertising would then start to display, or information.
Yeah, it would change the advertising based on.
Yeah, and it was also based on our demographics. So it was, they could sense our age, our potential skin color. I think the important thing around that, and that when you talk about trends that people aren't talking about, I know people are talking about it, but I just don't think that we really are advanced enough in the conversation, is what does that mean for individual privacy? And we've seen it in the Cambridge Analytica, but I think for most people in the street, they sort of, blink twice, read the news, and kind of click next on Facebook. What does that mean for what we as consumers, we as citizens are, getting access to based on the algorithms, the biases, all those kind of things that are kind of a little bit beyond the everyday citizens' reach and touch in terms of understanding what technology is being used to influence what they see, how they behave, or, how they're, I guess, influenced to try and behave and act. And we need a lot more transparency around that, I think. And we need to build capacity, both in our younger generation, around what that means, for individuals, what that means for government, and again, also what that means for the private sector.
Yeah, definitely. So it's been awesome to chat with you. I only have one last question, which is, how can people connect with you?
It has been fabulous chatting to you too. Thank you so much, Zoe, for having me.
We finally got there.
Oh, we did. Look, we did.
Yep.
Assistance. Yep. You're jetting all over the world. I'm kind of doing a little bit the same here and there between, Barcaldine and Tokyo. There's never a dull day. But you can find me on Twitter, Bronwyn Voyce. I have a professional Facebook page. I'm also on LinkedIn. Or you can drop me a line. My email is bronwyn@bronwynvoice.com.au.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for talking with me tonight. And I really look forward to our future conversations, because I know we will have a few of those.
Absolutely. Me too. Thank you so much, Zoe. It's been a pleasure.
Talk soon. Bye.
Bye now.
It's the Smart City Podcast. Whoa.
Thanks so much for listening to the Smart City Podcast. Show notes for this episode and all other episodes can be found at thesmartcitypodcast.com. If you have any questions or comments for me or any of my guests, connect with me via email, zoe@thesmartcitypodcast.com, or via the socials. I'm on Twitter and Facebook @SmartCityPod. As always, I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as I enjoyed making it.
Smart City Podcast is what you're looking for.